physique of the fight, guys, and also a Forbes contributor. And it is time to talk Sergey Kovalev versus Anthony Yarde. Fight took place today. Actually, well, probably tonight. Yes, tonight in Eastern Europe. They're 7 hours ahead of Central Time, 6 hours ahead of Eastern Time. So it was a night. It was nighttime there for sure. But yeah, we got an opportunity to watch this fight. It was actually I thought it was a pretty good fight, to be totally honest. I thought that had when here's the thing: when you say something's a good fight, that doesn't necessarily mean that you think that it was the most skilled competition that you've ever seen. Doesn't mean that. And it also doesn't mean that you think that both of the fighters were looked like they were world beaters or anything like that. Doesn't mean that at all. What it means is that the competition was there, the energy was there, and all of that. I mean, you can have two C-level fighters have a great fight. Proof of that is Arturo Gatti, Mickey Ward. Neither one of those guys are great fighters in terms of from a skill standpoint, but together they made two classics. This was a little bit in between there because obviously Kovalev's a skill fighter. Anthony Yarde has some skill, but I think we saw tonight that or today that he has some ways to go. I don't know if he'll ever actually get there. Kovalev has some tense moments in this fight, and obviously I already recapped this particular match on Forbes, so you can check that out as well. But I thought Kovalev had some very tense moments, but I thought the difference in him winning and losing was the fact that he got some. I do believe he was energized by the home crowd. They were very much behind him. I also think one of the biggest, if not the biggest factor in him winning today was the tutelage and the training and the corner work that was done by James Buddy McGirt. I mean, over and over again, Buddy, it continues to show why he is so important to Kovalev's corner. So this is the second fight in a row. And I think I will venture to say, and some people may say I'm wrong or off base with this, but I'm going to tell you, without Buddy McGirt in Kovalev's corner in this fight and as well in the rematch against Alida Alvarez, I will go as far as to say that I believe that Kovalev would have lost both of those fights without him. The other thing I thought was a big deal was obviously the Kovalev's jab, which you could attribute that to McGirt's, his instruction for Kovalev over the course of these last two fights. What he's essentially told Kovalev over and over again is get back to basics, get back to the jab. That's what's going to allow him to win. And that's what he did against Alida Alvarez and against Anthony Yarde. So let's talk about what actually happened in the fight. Like early on, I thought that Kovalev's jab was really just kind of shutting down Anthony Yarde's offense. Yarde was trying to use that Philly shell style, which I don't necessarily think is the greatest look for him, because in order to employ the Philly shell, you have to a lot of people feel like they can just come out in that stance and it automatically means it transforms you into Floyd Mayweather. And that couldn't be further from the truth. I think we see that anytime Adrian Broner tries to do that. In order to use the Philly shell effectively, you have to have extraordinary reflexes from a defensive standpoint. And you also have to have excellent hand speed, especially with the left hook, in using that check left hook, turning it over, using it to a jab, and then turning it over to a sweeping left hook. That's what Yarde was attempting to do. He had a little bit of success doing it in the first round. But as we talked about in our preview, myself and Peter Kahn, who's not here with me today, but he'll be back at some point in the future videos. But that's what we talked about. We talked about how that style or his energy and the stamina level, whether we kind of questioned whether or not he'd have that moving deeper into the fight. And as it turned out, that did ultimately end up, becoming an issue. Like I said, Yarde began to slow down. His punch output dropped. I had, after the sixth round, I had Kovalev winning 5-1. But in that seventh round, Yarde seemed like he found a little bit of something, right? He kind of started, he didn't completely abandon the Philly shell, because you can always tell when somebody's used to fighting a certain type of way, but when they're not thinking, they're going back into whatever it is their thing is, whatever the style is, they go back into it. They kind of fall back. And so he kind of put it off a little bit, and he was coming forward with both hands straight up. He was able to kind of pick off and parry some of the shots. And he was doing that so that he could get to Kovalev's body. Everybody knows that Kovalev's body has long been a weakness for him. Andre Ward exposed it, banging to the body, banging to the body. And you can just see, I don't know that I've ever seen a fighter with a worse poker face when they're hurt or when a punch bothers them. But when Kovalev takes a body shot, everybody in the arena knows he didn't like it. I mean, he has no fake in him. I mean, it's immediately he either pulls up his trunks, he steps back, resets everything. He gives a lot of signals to his opponent that shot right there just bothered me, right? And so we saw a lot of that at the end of the 7th round, but we really saw it in the 8th. Kovalev legitimately looked out on his feet at one point in the 8th. He was hurt and bothered by those body shots, and Yarde was really turning it on. How much was he turning it on? He was turning it on to the point that in the corner, Buddy McGirt sat Kovalev down and told him, man, if you don't show me something, I'm going to have to stop this fight. Now, at first, when he said it, I was like, ooh, that seems like you might be jumping the gun a little bit there, buddy. Like, I know he looked, like he was getting hit good and he was taking some body shots, but I don't think we're at a point where we should be talking about stopping the fight. That's my first thought. But then my second thought was Buddy McGirt was the trainer for Maxim Dadashev when he passed away shortly after his fight with Subriel Matias last month. So I was like, maybe he's a little, overly cautious, because you obviously something like that changes everybody involved. But then I thought about it and I said, maybe that's part of it. But maybe the other thing is he's calling Kovalev right now on the carpet and basically saying, hey, man, I'm going to light a fire under you, because if you don't show me anything here, then I am going to stop this fight. Because one, I'm not going to, I'm never going to let another fighter go through something like that. And then secondly, I'm going to light this fire under you, because you're going to hear this. I'm literally giving you an ultimatum. You either step out here and really start to show something, or I'm going to stop the fight. And here's the thing. Here's the proven point. If you're unable to answer my challenge, then I know that I'm doing the right thing by stopping this fight. But if you show me something, then I know I can put the towel in my pocket and I don't have to use that. And in the 10th round, Kovalev took advantage of what was now a drastically compromised Yarde. Yarde had dumped, if energy was liquid and you could turn a cup upside down and pour it all out, Yarde had emptied his cup in the 8th round. And when he could not get, and when he couldn't get Kovalev out in the 8th round, that was really just kind of it. And from that point on, it was all downhill. Yarde, I think he tried to take the 9th round off just to kind of try to get himself together. And then in 10th round, I think he started trying to find more. But in the meantime, while all this is going on, Kovalev is peppering him with the jabs and 1-2 combos. And these shots are landing more flush than they were landing early in the fight. And they're also landing more frequently. So now we're going to a place where Yarde went from nearly having Kovalev stopped to now looking like he's in danger of being stopped himself. So it was a couple different turns in this fight, which I think this is part of what makes a fight great. You got to have some momentum shifts. If momentum never shifts in a fight, then it's not a great fight. So we had some momentum shifts in this. And by the 11th round, man, Yarde was so gassed. It was just crazy. How gassed he was. He was lit. You've heard people, and you even heard me mention this a little bit earlier, or make this reference a little bit earlier in the video, out on your feet. Yarde was out on his feet, and he wasn't out on his feet because of the punishment or the punches that he'd been taking. He was just that tired. And throughout the fight, we heard Andre Ward and Timothy Bradley talk about how Yarde's muscle was going to work against him from a stamina standpoint. That's something that's pretty consistent across all combat sports. If you look at the UFC, if you look at the MMA, and you look at a guy like Tyron Woodley, he battled stamina issues most of his career because he's a little tank. You know what I mean? He's a little tank, just straight cut or muscle. And you look at them in the ring or in the octagon, and they look like, hey, man, this guy has to be the pinnacle of physical fitness. But that's not always the case. So yeah, it was really it was just interesting to see that whole development and how that ended up going. But it was in my opinion, like I said, a very exciting fight in the 11th round. Kovalev wound up hitting Yarde with a jab that spelled the end. He dropped right off a jab, and it wasn't even a huge punch. It wasn't a huge punch at all. It was and I wouldn't even necessarily, I mean, I guess it was kind of a power jab, but it wasn't one that I felt like, wow, he really got lit up. But he dropped, and when he went to the canvas, I knew, everybody knew. I'm like, this is done. This is done. He's done. I knew there was no way in the world he'd be able to get up. I knew there was no way he'd be able to get up, and that turned out to be the case. And Kovalev ended up winning the fight by 11th round KO. So how you doing, World Breaker Fighting? I appreciate you coming through and taking a look at the recap. Now, if you weren't aware of this, what we're doing now is we're looking at what Kovalev's what his prospects are moving forward. There's been a lot of talk about him taking on Canelo Alvarez. We know that Canelo had him on his radar. There was an offer that was made that was turned down. As a matter of fact, Canelo offered $1 million, reportedly offered $1 million to Anthony Yarde just to step aside so that him as the mandatory could would give up his opportunity to fight Kovalev. Yarde reportedly turned that down to take his chances of trying to beat Kovalev. Now, it was a gamble. It was definitely a gamble because here's the thing. He turned down $1 million guaranteed, partly because he believed in his ability to beat Kovalev, which we found out today he was wrong. But the other reason that he turned it down is because, yeah, I may get a world title fight later on. But here's the thing. If the WBO granted this exception, then now Kovalev as the mandatory, and then even Kovalev as a champion, or either Canelo as a champion, wouldn't have to face Yarde or whomever is the mandatory challenger for another 18 months. So then that might have put off his fight for a while, which meant during that time period, he probably would have to fight some other guys, or at least one more fight during that time, while he waited to again for his title opportunity, which obviously there's a payday with the title opportunity. So he gambled, he lost. It wasn't a career kind of ending kind of a loss. It wasn't anything. I don't even think he hurt his stock, to be honest, because I think that's the benefit of coming into a fight like this not being the major favorite. Yes, he lost his O, but I don't know a lot of people who gave him a great chance to come into Russia and beat a guy so much more experienced than him. So I don't know. Now, here's the thing. At 28 years old, I don't know how many layers Yarde is going to add to his game that he doesn't already have. That's the thing. I don't know how many of those he can add. He may be the guy. He may be who he is, and that just might be it. He just may be already who he is, and there's nothing that can change that. We'll find out. I know he'll get another opportunity. As far as Kovalev, it's got to be Canelo at this point. You would expect that negotiations for that fight would probably be picking up in the next few weeks. I would think they have to be targeting December, even though now December might be a little bit shaky because these promoters don't like to put on fights in the same month as as another big fight. And obviously we have Ruiz Joshua 2 on December 7th. So maybe they may be a little bit weird about doing that. But I don't know. Canelo may want to keep a certain schedule. He did fight Rocky Fielding in December last year. So maybe he would fight Kovalev. Maybe he'll pick up a thing where the December month is when he has his fight where he moves up in weight. Maybe that's something that he'll pick up for the remainder of his career. Based on what we saw from Kovalev Yarde and what I've seen from Kovalev in the last 5 to 6 fights, there's no question in my mind Canelo is going to be a gigantic favorite to beat Kovalev, and with good reason. Kovalev, the weakness in the body, he slowed down a bit with his hand speed. He does still have a great jab, but Canelo is an absolute fantastic fighter. He has a great head movement. He's a shorter guy. He will absolutely bang that body. And I gotta think Canelo's looking at this right now like he's licking his chops. He's like, I'll beat this dude. I will win a world title at 175 against the biggest name in the division. Who, Canelo needs to get to him before the rest of the 175s get to him, because in my opinion, Bertobiev, Bivol, and Gvozdyk will probably knock Kovalev out. So Canelo needs to get to him first. So that would help him out. I think that would really allow him to take advantage of what I think is now a compromised Kovalev. Kovalev's 36 years old. He clearly has some issues away from the ring. He's on his last stand. I think Andre Ward called it perfectly when he said he thinks Kovalev is about at 70% of himself. And he felt that a 70% Kovalev would be good enough to beat 100% Yarde, and that proved to be the case. So to me, that's the fight to make for both of these guys. Because here's the thing. I think whomever Kovalev fights next, if they're a quality opponent, I think he probably loses. If they're either of those 3 other 175-pound champions, he loses. If he fights Canelo, he loses. He may as well get the biggest payday possible in all of them, and that's going to come from Canelo. So, and who knows? Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe Kovalev gets his life together, gets all things cleared up, impending legal issues or whatever, gets all that wiped away, and gets himself together and puts on the performance of his life at 36 or 37, whenever it takes place. I don't know. But based off what I've seen from him lately and what I know about Canelo, I think Canelo wins that fight. So I want to, talk to you guys. I want to get a couple questions and see what you guys think, what your reactions are. So we're going to start off with World Breaker Fighting. He says that he thinks the Yarde would benefit from an experienced training team. I 100% agree with that. Tim Bradley and Andre Ward lambasted his non-sparring approach. I mean, they took aim at that in a major way. And I think the biggest place that we saw that is the fact that it was very similar to what Bradley said. He said he doesn't know how hard he can go because he hasn't been sparring, so he hasn't been in these fighting situations to know around about how many minutes do I usually start to gas. When you spar, you better believe that Sergey Kovalev's training team knows the part of the fight where he generally starts to slow down. You know why they know that? Because in sparring sessions, they've been watching him. And when he goes the rounds that he's going in sparring, they look at him, and around that fourth or fifth round, they start to see that pace drop. They got clocks there too. So he knows that about himself. And because he knows that about himself, they can fight around it. They can game plan around it. Because everybody's got a weakness, whether yours is stamina, whether you're whatever it is, you can try to game plan around it. One of the best examples I can say of that in terms of a weakness is Emmanuel Stewart had Vladimir Klitschko, and he recognized what his issue was, what his weakness was. It was if you could get to that chin, he was vulnerable. So he devised a plan for him in a way to use his height and to keep those big shots off of the chin. It was tying up, it was leaning on the guy's back of the guy's shoulders, and all of these different things he was doing, these techniques to protect himself. He created a style for him that worked with his strengths and around his weaknesses. So obviously there's training that can be done to increase the wind, but some of that I think is mental. It's about adrenaline. It's about a way that a guy approaches things mentally. And I just, I think that's kind of what we see with Yarde. He might always tire at a certain point. He's a muscular guy. I don't know if you can change his body type at 28 years old. That's just kind of what it is. But I agree with you, World Breaker, when you say he could benefit from an experienced training team, because an experienced training team is going to tell him, yeah, man, you're going to have some sparring included in your regimen. And we need to find out where's the bottom of this gas tank at, and find out if we can deepen it. And if we can't, we need to find out what we can do to work around the issue. And I don't know, it doesn't appear as though his training team has that ability, even in the corner. And so, because that's a strength and conditioning situation. But even in the corner, if you listen to the level of expertise offered to the fighters, now, obviously, they didn't give us in the corner audio for both fighters for every round. But if you listen to the direct, straight to the point, relevant information that's coming from Buddy McGirt, and then you listen to what's being told to Anthony Yarde, there's no question who had the better assistance. And so I absolutely think that Yarde could benefit from he could benefit from an experienced training team that could offer him a bit more than what he was getting on Saturday. I don't know that it would have ultimately made a difference in the result. Maybe it would have, but it definitely didn't help him on Saturday. So I don't know where he goes from here. I think he needs to take a step down, rebuild himself, maybe get 3-4 fights by the time he's like 31, 32 years old, come back and then look at challenging some of those top fighters at whomever is still sitting at the top at 175. I think that's his best chance, because at 31, 32, still be physically fit enough to perform at the top of his game. And hopefully he will have learned a bit more about himself and what he needs to do as a fighter to get better. I mean, that's really the key. That's the key to it for him. So it'll be interesting to find out and watch to see if he can do that. So don't have the busiest chat today, but I'm gonna give it a little bit more time to see if you guys have some more comments about Kovalev, Yarde, or if you have some other questions or comments you want to make. Get my thoughts on other things in the boxing world before we sign off with this recap for Kovalev Yarde. We do later on the night, though, we do have Estrada Beeman coming up. It's actually a pretty busy day in boxing. While there's not a ton of huge names, Kovalev was definitely the biggest name on the ledger today. And I know it's a little bit shocking for some people, because I know some people didn't even check. They just automatically assume that the fight is tonight. So I know there's going to be a wave of people around 8 or 9 o'clock Central and Eastern time looking for the results and the information on this fight. And it's not all they're going to find is they're going to be looking to catch the fight, I should say, watch it live, and they're going to find results all over the place, which is just that's just the way it goes. So, well, at any rate, I appreciate you guys watching for sure, and look forward to recapping some of the other fights. We probably won't do anything for Estrada Beeman tonight, but at any rate, like I said, I appreciate you watching. God bless and peace.